What's happening to the accelerating rate of health care and the sick people who are getting sicker? With that, I reserve my time.
Gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Texas, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment. Now,
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the Chair. I supported a seemingly similar amendment 3 weeks ago when the House considered H.R. 1217, a bill related to the Public Health Slush Fund in the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. However, I have to oppose this amendment because despite the seeming similarity of the two amendments, this really is an apples to oranges comparison. The Public Health Slush Fund, considered under H.R. 1217, provided a specified amount in mandatory funding for the Secretary in fiscal year 2011 and each year thereafter. Ms. Jackson-Lee's amendment 3 weeks ago, it would be possible to determine the amount of funds that would be rescinded in fiscal year 2011 if H.R. 1217 had been enacted into law. But the amendment offered today by Ms. Jackson-Lee actually strengthens the arguments in favor of passing H.R. 1213, the bill before us today. Section 1311 of the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act provided the Secretary with an unlimited amount of money with virtually limitless discretion to spend on establishing exchanges or what activities could facilitate enrollment in what are known as qualified health plans. Giving the Secretary a blank check to spend is an abdication of our responsibility here in the House of Representatives. This blank check also makes it impossible to implement the Jackson-Lee amendment. There is no dollar figure for how much the Secretary can spend on this program. It is simply an unknown unknown. The Secretary could decide tomorrow to spend another $100 million or another $100 billion. In 2013, the Secretary could take the advice of CMS and fund money into any amount of activities. Congress, and for that matter, the general public, won't know that until the money is spent. I think the gentlelady from Texas has good intentions with her amendment. Unfortunately, because Congress decided to leave it entirely up to the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Secretary alone to determine the amounts of money that can be spent, the amendment does not work in this circumstance. I urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment.
Gentleman reserved. Gentlewoman from Texas.
How much time remains?
3 minutes.
On my side?
On your side. Yes, ma'am.
Gentleman?
Gentleman has 3 minutes as well.
I thank the gentleman from Texas, but he well knows that we have had mandatory appropriations, and it is not difficult to indicate what money are you allegedly saving, so that the American public can juxtapose those so-called savings on the backs of the elderly, losing Medicare, of course, on the backs of sick families and sick children, and to see how we can stop the normal primary medical care that you would get for children that are in need, that these health exchanges would provide, and as well neonatal care for children who are born prematurely. This is what the Republicans would like us to do as we eliminate health exchanges. Frankly, he should look at what has already happened. 49 states, including the state of Dr. Burgess and myself, the state of Texas, has applied for funding for health exchanges. And so to stop in the middle and suggest that you are now impacting the deficit, no, you're killing and losing and indicating that you want to close down the good health care that we're trying to promote. Insurance exchanges will also be available again to small businesses, and Texas is a home to nearly 400,000 of them. The Kaiser Foundation says 23% of the Texas population lives in poverty. They would be able to participate in these exchanges. I would make the argument that it's good to put how much money you're allegedly saving so you can see how much you're losing by all the sick people who will not have care. I reserve my time.
Woman reserves. Gentleman from Texas.
And again, I would just simply point out that the gentlelady's amendment under the legislation that was considered previously was appropriate because there were actually funding levels that were mentioned in the legislation. Now, reading from the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, here in Section 4002 under the Prevention and Public Health Fund, paragraph B, which discusses funding, there are hereby authorized to be appropriated and appropriated to the fund out of any monies in the Treasury not otherwise appropriated, 1 for fiscal year 2010, $500 million, 2 for fiscal year 2011, $750,000, and so on and so forth. In other words, the funding is explicit under the previous legislation. Under the legislation today, which Health Benefits Exchange, here is how the funding language reads. Use of Secretary shall determine the total amount that the Secretary will make available for each state for grants under this subsection. Well, we have no earthly idea. Is that $10, $100, $100 million, $100 billion, $13 trillion? We have no earthly idea. So while the intent of this amendment in previous legislation, which was one which the majority could accept, in this case, it actually becomes meaningless because there is no dollar figure specified as the upper limit as to what the Secretary can spend. And I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Texas.
I thank my good friend from Texas, and he has made my argument because the Secretary of Health and Human Services can explicitly state the funding that might be used. In addition, isn't it interesting that this is being repealed on the basis of savings, and yet the Republicans can't explain whether there are going to be any savings or not. At the same time, sick people are going to get sicker, and in my state, 444 people out of every 100,000 have cancer. The population, 9.3, is diabetic, 32% are overweight, and they will not be able to have the coverage. I'm going to ask my colleagues to vote on a sensible amendment. Show us what you're going to save. Let it be put on the website. Let the American people see it, and explain why you would rather put these dollars on while you raise the cost in an unbelievable way of the fact that people will not have insurance and they will get sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker. And God forbid if we take out Medicare and all the seniors will wind up being sick and lose their lives as well. I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Texas.
I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from Texas.
I thank the gentleman very much. Let me just say that if H.R. 1213 passes, it will severely harm cash-strapped states who cannot afford to establish the health benefit exchanges, which, by the way, will help people of all backgrounds, and particularly our small businesses, our farmers, and, yes, the children that you've seen on these posters. I ask my colleagues to support this important amendment. Show your cards. If we're saving money, let it be on the website, and let us compare those savings against the thousands and millions of individuals who will be blocked from having health exchange opportunities, while some of us will have savings accounts, others will have nothing, absolutely zero. Vote for the Jackson-Lee Amendment to really show the cards of what happens when you cut out and repeal health care coverage for America. I reserve.
Gentlelady's time's expired. The gentleman from Texas has a minute and a half.
Mr. Chairman, the real travesty here is the fact that there is no upper limit on what the Secretary of Health and Human Services can spend on the exchanges. It is pointless to put up on the website how much money has been saved when the actual amount of money to be spent equals infinity. We are borrowing 42 cents out of every dollar that we spend at the federal level from the Chinese and handing the bill to our children and grandchildren. That has to stop. That's what this legislation is about today. That is why I urge my colleagues to vote against the Jackson-Lee Amendment and vote for the underlying bill. I yield back the balance of our time.
All time for debate on the amendment has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Texas. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The opinion of the chair is the noes have it. The gentlewoman from Texas.
I'd like the yeas and nays.
The gentlelady asks for a recorded vote.
For a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Texas will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment 2, printed in House Report 112-70. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in House Report number 112-70, offered by Ms. Waters of California.
Pursuant to House Resolution 236, the gentlewoman from California and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes, and the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California.
Thank you very much. My amendment requires the Secretary of Health and Human Services to submit to Congress a report on the extent to which states are expected to have difficulties establishing health benefit exchanges without the federal assistance repealed by this bill. The Affordable Care Act requires the establishment of health benefit exchanges in every state. These exchanges will be a marketplace where individuals, families, and small businesses can purchase health insurance. The exchanges will feature a variety of health plans offered by different insurance companies, all of which must offer a comprehensive set of essential health benefits at affordable prices. The purpose of these exchanges is to enable American consumers to compare premiums, out-of-pocket expenses, and benefits and make informed choices among competing health plans. The Affordable Care Act places an emphasis on state-based health reform. The Affordable Care Act allows states to set up their own health benefit exchanges and offers grants to states to assist them in doing so. A total of 49 states, the District of Columbia, and 4 territories have already applied for these exchange grants. These states and territories are working hard to determine what type of health insurance marketplace will be best for their families and businesses. Without federal funding, some states could have difficulty establishing exchanges in a timely manner. This could lead to poor management of the exchanges, fewer health plans included on the exchanges, and years of delay in getting the exchanges up and running. Some states might simply refuse to establish exchanges at all in the absence of federal assistance. This would result in greater costs for the federal government because the Affordable Care Act requires the federal government to set up health exchanges in those states that do not set up their own exchanges. According to the Congressional Budget Office, states that attempt to set up health exchanges without federal funding may face challenges in making their exchanges fully operational by 2014, as the law requires. These challenges could limit the desirability of the exchanges for consumers and reduce the capacity of some exchanges to process enrollment. As a result, CBO estimates that by 2015, there will be almost 2 million fewer people enrolled in state exchanges. Many states are already facing declining revenues and budget pressures as a result of the Great Recession. Some states were forced to make painful choices, increasing taxes or cutting spending in order to make ends meet. Budget pressures have forced states to consider closing public health facilities, postponing transportation and infrastructure projects, and laying off teachers, law enforcement officers, and other public employees. If the federal government expects states to set up health exchanges without any assistance, it will only compound their budgetary problems. My amendment requires the Secretary of Health and Human Services to report to Congress within 6 months of enactment on the difficulties states will encounter while trying to set up these exchanges without federal help. If Congress is going to deny states the funding that was mandated for them to set up their health exchanges, Congress needs to know the extent of the difficulties states will face without these funds. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield the balance of my time.
The lady yields her time. The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will rise in opposition to the Waters Amendment.
The gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
And I stand in opposition to the Waters Amendment because it does perpetuate the fallacy that the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act will actually provide affordable health care coverage options. You know, we've had this debate for some time, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have argued that the way to provide an affordable coverage option to the uninsured is through a massive 2,700-page law authorizing thousands of pages of new regulations. Yet we've learned that merely one costly requirement of the many contained in the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act has forced the Secretary to issue over 1,200 waivers. Now, Mr. Chairman, I want you to take a minute with me and to envision in your mind's eye, I want you to visualize a central planner, maybe a very benevolent central planner, but a central planner nevertheless, moving data points around on a spreadsheet. That's what we're going to have under this. Washington will literally impose thousands of new requirements on plans that kindly bureaucrats are kind enough to allow poor Americans to buy in the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act's exchanges. The only way to make these federally controlled health plans affordable is through massive subsidy, contained in the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. Yet every member of this body should know that we can no longer afford the business-as-usual spending binge to which my Democrat friends are clearly affixed. I also reject the premise of this amendment. Remember a few moments ago when debating the baseline bill, I said, you know, we've given the Secretary of Health and Human Services the ability to write all the rules of the game and then to function as the referee to interpret the rules. And that's what we're furthering with this amendment. The underlying assumption of this amendment is that the Secretary of Health and Human Services should issue a report to judge the benefits of the regulations. Oh, by the way, regulations that her own department writes. Given the politically charged reports being issued by the Department of Health and Human Services since the passage of the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, we shouldn't pay for another taxpayer-financed advertisement for their health care law. I urge my colleagues to oppose the Waters Amendment and will reserve the balance of my time.
Well, the gentleman can't reserve. The gentlelady's time's expired, so you either have to yield back or keep talking.
I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from California. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Gentlelady.
Request recorded vote.
The amendment's not agreed to. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from California will be postponed. It is now in order to consider. I've given you one. Yeah. It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 3, printed in House Report 112-70. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in House Report number 112-70, offered by Mr. Ellison of Minnesota.
Pursuant to House Resolution 236, the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Minnesota.
Mr. Chair, today I rise to offer an amendment to H.R. 1213 in opposition to the underlying bill. My amendment is very simple. It directs the Secretary of Health and Human Services to submit a report to Congress 6 months after the enactment of the bill that examines possible delays and potential enrollment reductions in the health care exchanges that will result from this bill. But before I dive into my amendment, Mr. Chair, let's review just for a moment. From the year 2000 to the year 2006, Republicans controlled both the House, the Senate, and the White House. And they controlled all three of those institutions at a time when Americans were literally going bankrupt because of medical debt. Because of medical debt and the fact that the Republicans refused to do anything at all to try to help Americans from our health care system, which was dysfunctional and broken, they did nothing. They stood back and watched 60% of all bankruptcy filings be as a result of medical debt. They sat back and watched 47 million Americans be uninsured as they faced nothing more than the emergency room as relief. They sat back and watched small businesses either have to offer no health care insurance at all or have to stomach an enormous health care burden where premiums just galloped along day after day. They sat back and watched while auto companies were producing vehicles where as much as $2,100 of a car was nothing but health care costs. This is the Republican caucus that now seeks to try to take away what the Democratic caucus and the United States Congress passed last time. Instead of trying to say, we're here to do something, we're here to offer some solutions, all they want to do is strip away from Americans that little bit of protection from the vicissitudes of the health care insurance industry that they've been subject to for so many years. Instead of saying, you know, we're here to help, they're here to help the insurance companies. That's whose side they are on, Mr. Chairman, and it is a shame and a disgrace, and I'm very, very sad to see this bill on the floor at all. So what I'd like to do is offer an amendment, Mr. Chairman. I'd offer like an amendment to say if we're going to do this, if we're going to take away from the American people these exchanges that are going to give them a little bit of relief, let's at least know what we're doing. Let's at least figure out what the effects are going to be on the American people instead of just snatching out of their hands these exchanges that are designed to give them a little bit of relief from the health care insurance companies. Let's find out who is going to be delayed, what potential enrollment reductions are going to exist. Let's figure it out. I think that this is an important and meritorious amendment, and I think that the least the Republican caucus can do, the least they can do is to say, you know what, if we are going to go back to the bad old days when before health care insurance were formed, back before the Affordable Care Act was passed, if we're going to go back to the bad old days, at least we ought to know what harm we're going to be doing to the American people. And I just want to urge support of this amendment, and I will reserve.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Texas.
I thank the Chairman for the recognition. I do rise in opposition to the Ellison Amendment.
Gentleman controls 5 minutes.
And Mr. Chairman, I do feel obligated to point out that if the insurance companies of this country love the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. Look what happened to their stock on March 24th of 2010. It went through the roof. The reason why is because they got an individual mandate, not supported by any Republican that I'm aware of. They got an individual mandate that every man, woman, child in this country now has to purchase their product. They were suddenly released from creating products that people might actually want, and now you have to buy their product because the federal government tells you you must, and the Internal Revenue Service is going to be the enforcer. But let's confine our remarks to the business at hand, which is the Ellison Amendment. The amendment would require the Secretary of Health and Human Services to submit a report on the possible delays and potential enrollment reductions in health benefit exchanges. Now, here's a bit of irony. The reason that we need this bill is because the authors were either inadvertently provided the Secretary of HHS an unprecedented, unlimited tap on the Federal Treasury for these grants, or they meant to provide this blank check to the Secretary. Now the amendment would ask the same Secretary to evaluate the impact of taking away their authority to spend unlimited money. I wonder how they're going to rule on that. Not one amendment has been offered this afternoon that would actually ask the Secretary to report on how they were going to spend these funds or provide information regarding how much money the Secretary actually intends to spend in this section. People should be aware that the amendment does not ask for a report on the benefit of health insurance exchanges. Rather, the amendment asks the Secretary to evaluate only the exchanges contemplated under the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act that gives the Secretary the authority to determine what plans can be sold and what benefits must be offered. The Secretary is even given the authority to limit your choice of doctors. That's not rhetoric. That's Section 1311H of the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. Some states may want to create exchanges that look nothing like the centrally controlled exchanges called for in PPACA. Yet this amendment only wants the Secretary to report on exchanges that the Secretary is charged with creating. Some states may want to create exchanges that actually provide people real choice and actually let people keep their doctor. Some states may feel that reforms other than exchanges fit their state better. I also oppose the amendment because it is a conflict of interest to ask the Secretary to report on whether it believes that unlimited funding and numerous authorities to control the exchanges are a bad or a good thing. I also reject the notion that only an exchange designed and controlled by Washington, D.C. can reduce the number of uninsured. I will reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Minnesota has 2 minutes. And the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, why all the attacks on the Secretary of Health and Human Services? I believe our Secretary of Health and Human Services is an honorable person, and there's no basis to attack their integrity on the House floor, and that, again, is a disgrace and a very sad occasion. This Secretary of Health and Human Services was appointed by a duly elected president, confirmed by the Senate, and yet the Secretary has to withstand all these attacks on their integrity. The fact is that this is still nothing but a diversion and a distraction. This is an attack on the American people's legislation to fix this health care system. And as the gentleman goes on and on about government, look, health insurance companies which have absolutely no accountability except for their stockholders and their highly paid CEOs are denying care, denying treatment, denying doctors. This is the tragedy that Americans are living through every single day. And by the way, Americans have gone bankrupt, have lost their livelihoods and have been uninsured to the tune of as much as 52 million people. What is the gentleman's answer to that? We've heard nothing about this, only what's wrong, only blaming government, only suggesting that in this democratic nation, which I am proud of, that he attacks our government, the American people's government. And this, again, is an abomination and a sad thing. Let me just say, if the insurance companies love the bill so much, why do they have lobbied against it to the tune of $14 million a day? I remember standing on this House floor, seeing the insurance company lobbyists here every day, and they spend as much as $14 million a day to defeat the Affordable Care Act. This is the bill that, according to the gentleman, they love so much. So the fact is that, again, is not accurate. It's untrue. This is a good amendment. It just adds a little bit of sunshine so that as the gentleman's bill to strip away this reform measure, which will help exchanges, which will help people get into an exchange to get an affordable health care insurance policy, as that is stripped away and snatched out of their hands, Americans will at least know why and the impact of it. I yield back.
The gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Texas also has 2 minutes left.
Mr. Chairman, and I will direct my remarks to you and try not to make them personal, but I am offended that the previous speaker would say that I am attacking the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Nothing could be further from the truth. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Chairman, that the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act that was pushed through this Congress by then Speaker Pelosi and members of the Democratic Conference gave the Secretary of Health and Human Services unprecedented power. Every man, woman, and child in this country, the most intimate aspect of their lives, is now controlled by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And further, every time in this law where it says, and the Secretary shall, and I believe there are almost 2,000 of those phrases, every time it uses those words, there is a new episode of federal rulemaking. There's thousands of pages that go into the Federal Register. Now, I know most people spend part of their nights reading the Federal Register every evening, but for those who don't, these regulations are coming at you at an alarming rate. And look, let's be honest about the insurance companies. The insurance companies love this bill. They get an individual mandate. You got to buy their product. You have no choice. It is a mandate enforced by the Secretary and, oh, by the way, by the Internal Revenue Service. Look, this is a bad amendment. Let us defeat this amendment, support the underlying bill, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. All time for debate on the amendment has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Gentleman from Minnesota.
Request for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Minnesota will be postponed. It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 4, printed in House Report 112-70. And for what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 4, printed in House Report Number 112-70, offered by Mr. Pallone of New Jersey.
Pursuant to House Resolution 236, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, and the member opposed will each control 5 minutes, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself 3 minutes. Mr. Chairman, my amendment requires the Comptroller General of the Government Accountability Office to study the impacts of the exchange grants on allowing states to set up state-run exchanges as opposed to having the federal government establish and operate the state's exchange. Now, Dr. Burgess and I have had a colloquy on this back and forth all afternoon, and I know he just mentioned it again. My whole point today has been that if we are going to have exchanges, which I know many of my Republican colleagues would not want to do it, but they're not repealing the state exchanges. They're simply saying that they're not going to give them any money to proceed. Now, I think that's a very short-sighted plan, because the fact of the matter is that the state exchanges would work best if they had the flexibility and they had the money so that they could figure out what was the best way to tailor the health care exchange program to their needs in their state. And my view is that by denying them that money through the state grants, we're simply letting the federal government come in and essentially run the exchange. Now, my colleague, Mr. Burgess, keeps mentioning over and over again, well, the Health and Human Services Secretary is going to do this and going to do that. Well, if he doesn't like that, then why in the world would he let her do it by saying that not giving the states the money to do their own thing? I mean, if you believe in states' rights, if you don't want the Health and Human Services Secretary to control the process, then let the states do their thing. And the only way they're going to be able to do that is if they get some money to accomplish that goal. I mentioned my home state of New Jersey has already received some money through these grants. They're doing demographic surveys. They're trying to find out who the clientele are, what the health concerns are of the clientele, so they can make decisions about what kind of plans that they would have on the exchanges, what they would offer on the exchanges. This is the type of thing that is allowed and encouraged if you have state grants. Without the state grants, that won't be possible. So all I'm saying with my amendment is to let us see what the GAO says what would happen if the federal government comes in and runs these exchanges rather than the states. I don't think it's going to be a good thing by comparison, but I would like the GAO to certainly study it. I would point out every 49 states, the District of Columbia, and 4 territories have gotten beyond the ideology and have applied for these exchange grants. There's almost nobody on either side of the aisle that doesn't have their state applying for these grants because the states know that if they're going to set up these exchanges, they might as well have the money so they can have the flexibility to do it the right way. So all you're doing by repealing these grants is pulling the rug out from the states, your own state, in almost every case, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. Now, I don't want to repeat what Mr. Deal said, now the governor of Georgia, but my colleague from Texas often mentioned the governor of Utah. And I just wanted to read a quote from the governor of Utah. Governor Herbert stated at a recent hearing in our committee, I yield myself an additional 30 seconds, Mr. Chairman. Governor Herbert of Utah stated at a recent hearing in the Energy and Commerce Committee on March 1st, and he was commenting on Governor Barbour, who was also appeared before the committee, and he said, I am not saying it's the approach, it's an approach, and I would just echo what Governor Barbour said. You know, all states ought to have the opportunities to find the solutions to the problem. So again, even the governor of Utah, which Dr. Burgess has mentioned many times, has said, I may not like the Affordable Care Act, I may not even like exchanges, but if you're going to have exchanges, it certainly makes sense for states to operate them and have the money to do it in the right way. And that's what this bill would stop. That's why we need the GAO report, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Texas, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition to the Pallone amendment.
Gentleman controls 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield myself 4 minutes. I'm rising in opposition to the amendment. The description provided by the author to the Rules Committee states that the amendment, quote, would require the General Accountability Office to report on benefits of funding in setting up state-run exchanges that reflect the state's marketplace as opposed to state exchanges established and operated by the federal government, close quote. Now, that decision sounds appealing enough in its own right, but sort of like the health care reform law of last year, you have to read the amendment to find out what's in it. The amendment does not ask the General Accountability Office to examine the benefits of state-run health insurance exchanges. Rather, the amendment asks the GAO to report only the exchanges called for in the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, whose rules and structure are dominated by Washington rather than states or individuals. The amendment description speaks to, quote, setting up state-run exchanges that reflect the state's marketplace, close quote. However, talk about flexibility, state flexibility in the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act is just that. It is merely talk. I would remind my colleagues about the golden rule. He with the gold makes the rules. So let's once again look at just a few areas where Washington will dictate operation and structures of the exchanges. For the purposes of comparison, let me use Washington versus Austin, the capital of my state. So will Washington or Austin choose the essential benefits that must be paid for by individuals and families? Section 1302 of the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act says that responsibility is Washington's. Will Washington or Austin control whether health savings accounts and other consumer-driven plans can be offered? Section 1302d2 says Washington wins that round. What about, will it be Washington or Austin that will select the doctors and other healthcare professionals that are allowed to provide care in the exchange plans? Well, Section 1311H gives that authority to Washington, not Austin. Washington or Austin to decide if your plan's provider network is adequate, regardless of whether or not it covers your doctor. Section 1311C1B gives that authority to Washington, D.C. Will it be Washington or Austin to decide whether a plan provides linguistically appropriate and culturally sensitive information? Section 1311I gives the nod to Washington. Will it be Washington or Austin that determines whether a state plan is properly accredited? Well, once again, Section 1311C1D, Washington wins that round also. Washington or Austin, who do you think is going to win this one? Can decide when individuals can enroll in an exchange plan. Section 1311C1I6, Washington, D.C. wins that one. Washington or Austin impose certification and decertification plan requirements written by the Department of Health and Human Services. Well, that's hardly fair because HHS is in Washington, and you guessed it, Washington wins that round. Washington or Austin, who do you think is going to win this one? Judge the adequacy of an exchange internet website. That's something that the state should be able to decide. After all, who knows the residents of the state better than Austin in the state of Texas? Well, Washington actually wins that round. How about this one? Washington or Austin force state government to pay for existing benefit requirements. Well, guess what? Washington, not the state, Washington will be the one making that determination. Then under Section 1321, if the Secretary determines a state has not taken the necessary steps as determined by the Secretary to meet all the requirements set forth by the Secretary, then the Secretary will take over the state exchange. I think, Mr. Speaker, you begin to get the impression this is not state flexibility. This is of and run by Washington, D.C. I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey has a minute and a half left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. My colleague on the other side, I don't understand. You are saying that you want Austin to do it. You want Austin to have the flexibility to frame a program that is done best because you think that Austin and the state is going to do it best? Well, if that's the case, why in the world are you putting this bill on the floor? Because my whole point in this amendment is that by passing this bill, you are simply abrogating the right of the state to make a decision and to have the flexibility to set up a good program that's tailored to the state. It's the exact opposite of what you're saying you want to do. If you believe that the Secretary of Health and Human Services in Washington is going to make the wrong decision, I don't think she would, but if you believe that, then you shouldn't be offering this bill, because this bill takes away the flexibility and the power of Austin or the states to make the right decisions. It is totally contrary to the purpose of what you're trying to accomplish. It makes, to me, it's mind-boggling. Now, I think what you're really trying to do, of course, is just say, let's forget about the exchanges, let's defund the exchanges, let's get rid of the whole Affordable Care Act. Obviously, that would be very unfortunate because so many more people are going to be covered at a low cost with a good benefit package, and all the benefits, the anti-discriminatory practices that have already been in place would be gotten rid of. But I would say again, if you're totally opposed to the bill, that's one thing. But if you feel strongly that the state exchanges should be run by the states, then your legislation today is totally misplaced.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair would remind all members to address their remarks to the chair. The gentleman from Texas has a minute remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will yield myself the balance of our time. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, as seductive as the title sounds, does not empower the states. In fact, it does just the opposite. Some states have created or are in the process of creating state exchanges that would not meet the requirements set forth by Washington. For these and other states that don't believe that Washington knows best, I oppose this amendment. I urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment. I urge my colleagues to support the underlying bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate on the amendment has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The opinion share, the noes have it. The noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 5, printed in House Report 112-70. For what purpose does the gentleman from Vermont rise? Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 5, printed in House Report number 112-70, offered by Mr. Welch of Vermont.
Pursuant to House Resolution 236, the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Vermont.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. This Congress and the last Congress are at odds about health care. It's a fundamental question of fundamental importance to the people of this country. The last Congress passed the Patient Protection and Affordability Act. The first act of this Congress, the House of Representatives, was to repeal that act. We've got disagreement about what should be done. The House legislation is pending in the Senate, likely to go nowhere. This legislation before us today is a further effort to try to unravel the law that was passed by the House, the Senate, and signed by the President last year. Acknowledging that there is a serious debate within this body about the future direction of health care, this amendment would allow for the state health exchanges, where there have been applications by 13 states for early implementer grants, to go forward. It would exempt from the defunding $1.9 billion that would be then subject to appropriations up to that amount. It wouldn't guarantee it. It would be subject to appropriations. My preference, quite frankly, was to make that mandatory as it was in the original bill, but that was not permitted under the rules in order to make this amendment in order. The advantage of doing this is it does, and I speak to my friend, the gentleman from Texas, it allows the local states to be making decisions about how best to design their health care. And just to go through some of the recitation by the gentleman from Texas, the early innovator grants have been awarded to 11 states. Again, it allows them to decide what's the best design of these health exchanges. And these states include what we might call red states and blue states. It's Kansas and Wisconsin. It's Maryland and Massachusetts. It does include Vermont, my state, that has taken on responsibility to try to move forward to design a health care system that's good for business, good for consumers, and good for taxpayers. So the fundamental question here is, do you think that states can be a laboratory of experimentation and policy? The states take action. They implement a plan according to the design in Boston if it's Massachusetts, or Hartford if it's Connecticut, or Tulsa if it's Oklahoma, or Montpelier if it's Vermont. And the folks in that state, where they have fundamental responsibility for the citizens of that state, will be making the decision. This allows us to be partners with the states where they take on this responsibility. They get some help from the federal government to implement these early these health benefit exchanges, and we are allowed then to basically get the benefit of the federal system where states make decisions, the federal government is a partner. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
And I'll yield myself 4 minutes. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle have argued that these grants encourage flexibility by promoting state control of the exchanges. Yet this argument is based on the premise that states can actually design the right health care plan for their citizens under the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. But when you look at the law, you understand that this concept is actually not true. In reality, the relationship between the states and Washington, states are the servant, not a partner of Washington under this health care law. The Secretary of Health and Human Services will control what benefits must be bought in an exchange. A benevolent central planner and I underscore the word benevolent, but a benevolent central planner will decide whether you, your doctor, your nurse, your clinic, or your hospital can provide care to you through an exchange plan. A regulation writer at the Department of Health and Human Services will decide whether or not your health savings account complies with their rules. Rather than promote local control, the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act's exchanges have only the veneer of providing state flexibility. And they certainly rob an individual and they rob families of health care choice, even if they are happy with the coverage that they currently have. The Welch Amendment does not authorize a grant program for states to establish exchanges, that is, exchanges written with a lowercase e, but rather health benefit exchanges, all caps, that are contemplated in the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. Section 1321 of the bill has the title, quote, "State Flexibility in Operation and Enforcement of Exchanges," close quote, but a reading of that section shows the title could not be any more misleading. The section is littered with phrases such as, quote, "other requirements the Secretary determines appropriate," close quote, or words such as, quote, "the Secretary determines that an electing state has not taken the actions the Secretary determines necessary," close quote. Section 1311K, I've referenced that previously, Section 1311K states that, quote, "an exchange may not establish rules that conflict with or prevent the application of regulations issued by the Secretary," close quote. Mr. Chairman, I am encouraged that the supporter of the amendment believes that we should not provide the Secretary with a blank check. However, I oppose this amendment because it perpetuates the idea that the federal government should dictate how states establish exchanges. Last year, we were told we need to read the bill to know what is in it. Today, I ask those here in this body to ignore the rhetoric and actually read the bill. Those who do will clearly see that any suggestion that the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act provides states flexibility do not hold up to the words in this 2,700-page bill. I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Vermont.
And how much time do I have?
2 minutes.
Thank you. I want to talk a minute about Social Security. Social Security, you have access to Social Security whether you live in Texas or you live in Vermont. It's a program that benefits every single citizen of this country. And the underlying premise of Social Security is that we're all in it together. We all pay into the benefit program and we all benefit, whether you're rich or whether you're poor. We're all in it together. Our amendment acknowledges that this is a stronger and better country if all of us have access to affordable health care, whether you live in Texas or you live in Vermont. So yes, it is true that in the Welch Amendment we maintain that national commitment to all Americans being covered and all Americans benefiting by access to health care, which we know they mean. But what it also does is say that in the implementation, in the delivery of health care, driving decisions and authority down to the local level will help us be successful. It will allow states to show that maybe they have a better way of achieving this goal of access to health care for every citizen in the country. So, yes, I say to the gentleman from Texas, we do embrace in my amendment the concept that every American should have access to affordable health care. But what we also do, I say to the gentleman from Texas, is acknowledge that states can experiment, that folks at the local level may have a better way to make decisions and actually to deliver care. And if they design a plan in Texas to do it one way, and we design a plan to do it in Vermont another way, why not? Why not let the states figure out how best to make good on this promise to America that every one of us can have access to the health care that we need? I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas has 2 minutes remaining.
And I thank the chairman. And I would just say once again, the flexibility does not exist. It's a veneer. It's a falsehood that under this plan that the states would maintain flexibility. The Secretary determines whether or not the states are complying. The Secretary determines whether or not the plans are in compliance with what the Secretary thinks is a reasonable plan to be offered. Look, if we want to talk about the ability of people to buy insurance across state lines, that's an argument that we can and should have. I don't know why your side rejected that in the debates over the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. The fact of the matter is they didn't. We are where we are. Let's defeat this amendment and support the underlying bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
Time for debate on the amendment has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. No. The opinion share, the noes have it. The noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
I move that the committee do now rise.
The question is on the motion to rise. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The opinion chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Accordingly, the committee rises.
The House will be in order. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House and State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 1213, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
The Chairman of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 1213 and has come to no resolution thereon. Pursuant to House Resolution 236 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 1214. The Chair appoints the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. LaTourette, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
This is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 1214, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to repeal mandatory funding for school-based health center construction.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Burgess, and the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, each will control 30 minutes, and the chair would recognize the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself such time as I may consume. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act included $105 billion of directly appropriated mandatory funding of numerous programs and provisions included in the law. For example, Section 4101A of the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act provides $50 million in mandatory spending for construction and expansion of school-based health centers every year from the inception through 2013 for a total of $150 million. In our current financial situation, it is only not necessary, but it is our responsibility that we examine all of our spending and make all necessary adjustments. H.R. 1214 is a simple bill aimed at a simple goal: to get some of the spending that the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act advanced inappropriately. Section 4101A of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act funds only the construction of school-based health centers. The $50 million in grants are for construction only, and there is an express prohibition on these funds being used to provide health services. No such provision was in the bill passed by the House. If you will recall, H.R. 3200 was the Health Care Reform Act that the House of Representatives worked through its committees of jurisdiction, on which we held hearings, on which we had the debate on the floor of the House, and which passed the House in November of last year. It had no such provision in the House Democrats' passed bill. And the Senate Democrats considered school-based health centers Since no such provision was included in the health bill, and if the Senate Democrats considered the school-based health centers important enough to receive mandatory funding, why was the mandatory funding strictly limited to the construction of the buildings? Not 1 cent is guaranteed to see a child, but automatic checks out of the Treasury to build these centers. I will point out that Section 4101B of the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act created a new discretionary grant program for school-based health centers, but this grant program requires them to use the funding to provide health care services. However, the President's budget did not fund Section 4101B, failing to provide school-based health centers money expressly for the purpose of actually providing the service. Now, fundamentally, we might even have some agreement on school-based health centers. I am on record of having supported them in the past, and I believe opening healthcare points of access is important. I want to do more in this realm, but providing mandatory spending, forced spending to construct facilities without adequate safeguards that they will provide care is irresponsible, and it certainly abdicates the purse-string nature of the House of Representatives. We are the people's house. It is our obligation to oversee the money that is spent on behalf of the people of the United States. Not one guarantee of a doctor, not 1 cent of payment for an immunization, not 1 ounce of common sense is included in the policy. I will note that this bill does not touch the discretionary program to provide care. I urge my colleagues to support restoring a little fiscal restraint and a little responsible policy to a small part of the law which will destroy the practice of medicine as we know it in the nation and put the taxpayer on the hook for trillions of dollars in spending. I thank the Chairman for the attention, and I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I yield myself 3 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, once again, I'm listening to my colleague, Dr. Burgess, who I respect, and he's talking about the common sense being lacking on the Democratic side. After listening to him, I think the rationale and the common sense is lacking on the Republican side. My colleague from Texas has said over and over again he supports school-based clinics. He even supports federal funding for school-based clinics. Then what is the possible rationale for posting this bill? You know, many of my colleagues on the other side have said today they're opposed to the entire Affordable Care Act. Colleagues on the other side have said today they're opposed to the entire Affordable Care Act. They're opposed to funding the entire Affordable Care Act. Of the Affordable Care Act that they even agree with, from my understanding, listening to my colleague from Texas, and still saying we're going to defund them. I defy my colleague to really understand why. School-based health clinics are a tremendous success story. These programs provide primary care, mental health, dental health services to vulnerable children across the country in every state. Multiple studies have found that these programs are cost-effective investments. They result in lower emergency room usage, hospitalizations, and Medicaid costs. In fact, patients seen at school-based health centers cost Medicaid on average $30.40 less than comparable non-school-based health center patients. This is saving the federal government money. That's the bottom line. And what we're trying to do here is to basically provide for construction, renovation, and equipment for these centers. Now, in order to get the grant for that, you have to show that you have the funds to operate the center. So when Dr. Burgess says, why are you paying for construction, why are you paying for renovation, but you're not paying or you're not providing for operations, every one of these has to show that they have the money to do the operations before they get the money for construction. What does construction and renovation mean? It means jobs. I repeat again, when I was home for the last 2 weeks, all I heard from my constituents is, when are you going to improve the economy more? When are you going to create more jobs? This is a program that creates jobs, helps kids, provides for their well-being and their health, and it's all preventative. These projects have to be shovel-ready in order to be funded. So we're talking about money that's going to be immediately spent to put these centers together and to renovate them. You know, I keep hearing my colleagues say, repeal and replace. That's the mantra with the health care bill. We want to repeal it and replace it. But I never hear anything about replace. all I hear about is repeal. And in this case, repealing a program that is a proven success. It makes absolutely no sense to move this bill, to pass this bill. I hear my colleagues on the other side say over and over again, they're for these clinics, they're for these centers. Then why in the world do you bring this bill to the floor? I urge my colleagues to oppose this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll yield myself 1 minute. This mandatory spending was not in H.R. 3200, the House-passed health care reform bill. Now, make no mistake, I voted against 3200 just as I voted against 3590. But nevertheless, the bill that Subcommittee Chairman Pallone last Congress brought through did not have mandatory spending for school-based health centers in his bill. Some of us get up today and act as if mandatory spending for this program is imperative. It's the only way to go. We can't provide care if we don't have mandatory spending for the building the exam room. But again, I remind my colleagues on the other side that simply an exam room with an exam table, a thermometer, and a sphygmomanometer does not provide 1 ounce of care to a child. It does not save any money in an emergency room visit. It is simply an exam room sitting unutilized because the President of the United States said, I'm going to zero out the discretionary funding for staffing these clinics. That's why this makes no sense. I urge, again, support of the underlying bill. That it is important to bring this back into the authorization process so our appropriate committees can have the oversight over the expenditure of these funds. I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves.